Kansas, gateway to Oz. Under the rainbow, this is where it was. Hollyhocks and red ripe tomatoes, hand-churned homemade ice cream. Let me tell you, Kansas is more than tornadoes. It's the best part of Dorothy's dream.
I'm Deb Bisel. Welcome to a very special episode of Around Kansas. We're in the quaint little cemetery of Elmdale, and then we're going to go back home to Patrick County, Virginia, to my home, where this young man, Sergeant Neale Narramore, gave his life during World War II in the service of his country. You won't want to miss this incredible episode of Around.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff Progress Powered by Kansas farmers.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Around Kansas, brought to you by Tarwater Farm and Home. Come on by, we'll treat you like family.
Welcome to Around Kansas. I'm Deb Bisel. What an incredible story we have for you today, and what a gratifying story this has been for me to research. Now, I grew up pretty much knowing about the plane crash in 1944 on Bull Mountain in Patrick County, Virginia, that killed the 11 crewmen aboard, including Neale Narramore from Elmdale, Kansas. There was just a few years ago, a memorial was placed on the courthouse lawn back in Stewart, Virginia, and there's a memorial on the mountain to them, thanks to my good friends Clarence Hall. In researching this story, though, I've come across such a much bigger story. I actually went to Elmdale and we visited the Methodist Church where Sergeant Narramore's funeral was held in 1944. The other piece of the story, and what the good folks in Chase County have made me aware of, is just incredible. Now, Neale Narramore had an older brother, Roth Narramore, who was stationed in North Africa when Neale was killed, and the Army brought him back for his funeral. They brought him into Miami and then flew him into Dallas, Fort Worth, and then Wichita, where a highway patrolman picked him up and brought him to the Elmdale Methodist Church for his brother's funeral. What an incredible feeling that must have been. For in 1941, Roth Narramore's funeral had been held in that same church. He was presumed killed in action at Pearl Harbor. He and some other boys from Chase County were at Pearl Harbor. In fact, 4 of them were from Elmdale. Marvin Dull, Roth Narramore, Bill Pretzer, and Richard Bell were all from Elmdale. And then there was a Dale Bowers from Clements, also in Chase County. So, when the bombing occurred, Roth Narramore sent his parents a telegram. Just 4 words. Am safe, don't worry. So, how relieved they must have been to have gotten that telegram. But not long afterward, they got a telegram from the War Department that said their son had, in fact, been killed in action at Hickam Field. So, a week later, they had a funeral for Roth Narramore at the Elmdale Methodist Church. Of course, the entire community, a little bitty community like this, everybody's going to be affected by that. 10 hours after Roth Narramore's funeral, they get another telegram from the War Department. We are gratified to inform you that our previous telegram was in error, and your son is severely wounded but alive. Can you imagine what this poor family had gone through? Thinking he was okay, then thinking he was dead, having a funeral for him, and then realizing that he was alive. And can you imagine when they got word that the younger son had been killed back in Patrick County, Virginia, just in a training mission? Can you imagine how hopeful they must have been that that report, too, must have been an error, and how they must have waited, hoping that they would receive yet another notice that their son was still alive? What a heartbreaking story. I just can't imagine the roller coaster of emotions that this family went through. And we were able to contact several of the family members and some of the folks back in Chase County. And I want you to know these men aren't forgotten. And we're just so pleased to share their story with you today. Stay with us.
American innovation is being driven in places you might not expect by people like Brent Hayek, an Oklahoma family farmer, who recently set a world land speed record in a Ford Super Duty pickup truck powered by renewable B20 biodiesel. Advanced performance is here, now, putting America on the fast track to more jobs and energy independence. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
This segment is brought to you by Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego, just a short drive down the Yellow Brick Road.
Welcome back to Around Kansas, and we're with Locke Boyce. He's the local veterinarian here in Stewart, Virginia, but he's also one of the owners of Bull Mountain. And Bull Mountain, of course, is the site of the plane crash in 1944 that killed the crew, and including our boy Neale Narramore from Kansas. And Locke, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, you've tell us you've got a little bit of interest in World War II, and then you came to own the mountain and got interested in this crash site. So just tell us how that came about.
Yeah, my family purchased the land actually where the crash site is in 1976, and we moved a cattle operation up here. The crash site is of no real commercial value. It's up about 3,200 feet in altitude up a very steep, rough mountain. I'm very sorry that we couldn't go up there today, but it's pouring down rain here, and the entire mountain is encased in fog. That's almost exactly the weather conditions at the time of this crash. Of course, it was a big thunderstorm, but when the clouds move in, the cloud banks move in, that mountain disappears. And we know of at least 5 major airplane accidents that have occurred on Bull Mountain, including, tragically, the Hedrick crew airplane crash that occurred a few years ago associated with the NASCAR race in Martinsville.
Right, exactly. Now, the model that you've got, tell us what that is.
Most people don't, nowadays, aren't familiar with World War II bombers, but the airplane that crashed on Bull Mountain and in which your Kansan was riding in was a B-24 Liberator. It was built by the Consolidated Aviation Company. The first prototypes of this aircraft were actually seaplanes. This thing was going to be a seaplane. But when the war came, there was a requirement for a heavy bomber to supplement the B-17, which most people are more familiar with. It was a 4-engine, radial engine aircraft. It was gasoline fueled.
Oh, wow.
That was not a good thing. Mm-hmm. The B-17 built a fuel that was more similar to kerosene. It's a little bit harder to catch fire. Mm-hmm. When a B-24 would take a good hit with anti-aircraft fire or rounds from an attacking fighter, they had a tendency to explode in a large fireball. So there weren't as many survivors of combat action in B-24s percentage-wise as there were in the B-17s and most of the other bomber aircraft of World War II. This aircraft had a speed of just over 300 miles an hour and an operational ceiling of just under 30,000 feet. And they used typically an 11-man crew. Mm-hmm. So there were 11 men on board. In 1944, the Bull Mountain airplane had a crew of young kids. They started training at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, now it's an Air Force Base, in Ohio, and they were headed on a more or less shakedown flight to Charleston, South Carolina, where the airplane was to be placed on ships and taken to the European theater. you've got to understand that these crews were in their early 20s, 20, 21 years old. Their life experience was 1 or 2 years of college for some of them. There were some college graduates, but most of them were just kids. And if you had 2 years of college, you were eligible to be a pilot or a navigator. And the training at Wright-Patterson was about 6 weeks. This bomber was the most common. This was the highest produced bomber in World War II. We built almost 20,000 of these. 20,000 of these large airplanes to fight the war, and they served in every theater and every action of the war. It was extremely long range, and it could really carry a large bomb load. A B-24 could carry twice the bomb load of a B-17 and over much longer range.
We're going to take a break real quick. We'll be right back with more of Around Kansas, so stay with us.
Hello friends, I'm Ernie Rodina.
And I'm Dawn Dawson with the Better Horses Radio Show.
For over 9 years, we've been bringing the Better Horses Radio Show to markets all across the Midwest. We talk about God, lots about horses.
We talk about cows, we talk about horse health, we talk to top trainers, and we even talk about Roy Rogers.
We're having a blast with Better Horses Radio Show and would love to take it to a market near you.
So visit our website at betterhorsesradio.com and let us or your local radio station know you'd like to hear it in your area.
The Better Horses Radio Show is unbelievable.
Buying a car shouldn't be this hard. And at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego, it isn't. It's actually awesome. Whether you want a new or used car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. Even if you want to custom order a new car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. See Toby's team at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego. We're awesome.
Around Kansas, brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff Progress Powered by Kansas Farmers.
Welcome back to Around Kansas, and with me is Locke Boyce here in Stewart, Virginia, where I went to high school, by the way. And we're talking about the plane crash on Bull Mountain in 1944, killed 11 crew members, including Neale Narramore from Elmdale, Kansas. So, Boyce, the night of this crash, exactly what happened? Do we know?
Yeah, as I said, the plane was ordered to fly from Central Ohio to Charleston, South Carolina for embarkation to the European theater. The pilot was a kid from Elkin, North Carolina.
Too far from here.
Not too far from here. It's in Yadkin County. And he had written, his daddy was on the local drugstore, and he wanted to fly his airplane over his mother's house on their way to Charleston. And he told her that he was going to let down his landing gear if it was during the daytime, or flash on and off the lights if it was at night, so she would know that that low-flying airplane over their little farm was him, headed to war. But he had a young, very inexperienced navigator, and they got lost. And they wound up in one of these early spring thunderstorms that we have here in Virginia, as you know, which are really stupendous, especially along these mountains. And the reports were, because there was no direct radio contact with this aircraft, the reports were that the airplane was flying very low, trying to find a hole in the cloud cover so that they could identify any ground feature to reorient themselves and tell where they were. They flew up this road here, which is now called Tudor Orchard Road, following the path of that road. The road goes between two big mountains. When they got through that, the airplane gained altitude. Evidently, the pilot became aware that there were mountains around him. So they gained altitude. They went up over the top of Bull Mountain, and then they turned back to the the south, and as they turned back south, the plane impacted the ridge of Bull Mountain, just below Richwood Knob. 50 more feet, 50 feet, and this airplane would have cleared the ridge, and you might be interviewing Mr. Narramore to get his memoirs. It was tragic. To this day, and had we gone to the crash scene, you can see the damage to the side of the mountain where each of these 4 engines impacted and the nose. So there are 5 holes in the side of the mountain just below the ridgeline. Now the right outboard engine actually hit the mountain and broke off and continued to fly, if that's what you call it, over the top of the ridge and went quite some distance down into a valley, the Rich Creek Gorge. And we found it in 1979 along the Rich Creek. So parts of this airplane were not discovered until relatively recently.
We're going to take a break real quick. We'll be right back with more of Around Kansas, so stay with us.
Tar Waters has what you need for all seasons for around the farm and home. Working, hunting, growing, feeding, snow removal, even fun for the kids. And a service department with experienced techs to help keep your equipment in top running condition. Tar Waters has a huge selection and the best prices. Tar Water Farm and Home, family owned and operated since 1978. They have what you need.
This is Deb Bisel, the resident historian at historic Topeka Cemetery, 1601 Southeast 10th Street, just a few blocks down from the Capitol. October 30th, we're having a very special event here at the cemetery. We're going to mark the 150th anniversary of the Battle of the Blue. Now, that was a 3-day battle that went on in eastern Missouri, and basically the Kansas militia was called out to keep the Southerners from invading Kansas. We have in our cemetery one of the most beautiful monuments, maybe the only monument specifically to that battle, put up by Guilford Gage. And in front of that monument, around 4 o'clock on October 30th, we're going to have the Adjutant General, we're going to have descendants from the men who fought that day, and we're going to have a wonderful program just to remember those men. We invite you to come. This is free and open to the public. There's going to be a reception afterwards, and you can find us on Facebook for more information. Love to see you there.
This is the fast track to more jobs and America's energy independence. Advanced performance is here now. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
Around Kansas, brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook, or visit us online at sftmeats.com.
Now, when the plane crashed, did that set the mountain on fire?
It started a major fire. Remember, these were gasoline-powered aircraft, so there was quite a big fire. And even in a thunderstorm, some of the surrounding vegetation caught fire from the heat. So there was a fire to put out. Mr. James Marshall Orr, at that time, was he was the senior equipment operator for Cabell Tudor, who owned the property in those days. Mm-hmm. And he took an old Caterpillar crawler and hooked tobacco sleds to it and went up the mountain. There was no road up there at that time. He went directly up the mountain, following old lumber trails and deer trails to get to the crash site. And he was the first one on scene, and he recovered the bodies. Some of them were badly burned, but one body had been ejected from the aircraft, strapped to its seat. And this poor guy was found seated in his seat, still strapped in, and looking relatively unscathed in the woods. He was just sitting there. And Marshall Orr told me that he actually walked up to the guy and started talking to him, asking him if he was okay, and that was a heck of a crash he'd just survived, and found later that a large piece of metal had actually gone into his back. So evidently this guy, whoever he was or wherever he was seated in the aircraft, had been blown out with the impact.
So he was already dead when he was...
He was dead. There were no survivors. They were all killed instantly on impact. And all of the other ones were severely burnt.
Now, when they, I can't even imagine what it was like to recover those bodies from up on the mountain and then the debris. And somebody told me that there are places to this day that the grass won't grow because it was so badly scorched.
Well, that's kind of an exaggeration. The grass won't grow because it's really rocky up there.
Okay.
But you're right that when you walk around that crash site, you're walking on melted aluminum.
Wow.
These things were built out of aluminum. And incidentally, this particular aircraft that crashed on Bull Mountain was not painted. It was a bare aluminum with no paint on it. The paint wasn't that the paint was burnt off, but if you've noticed the pieces of the airplane that you saw, that was natural aluminum, and that was normal because a lot of them went actually all the way to Europe before they actually painted them. These guys never made combat, but nonetheless they were real heroes, and it's a shame that they didn't get to do their bit. But it does point up that non-combat deaths, as they're called in the military service, are nonetheless deaths, and that the victims of non-combat mortality are missed and mourned just as much as those who actually get shot down by German fighter aircraft over Europe.
We're going to take a break real quick. We'll be right back with more of Around Kansas, so stay with us.
Now another gardening tip with Annette Jackson.
Now is the best time of the year to fertilize your lawns. The best product for our area is Fertilome Lawn Food Plus Iron. With its blend of fast and slower release nitrogen and a complete formula of minor nutrients, Fertilome Lawn Food Plus Iron provides your lawn with nutrients for the darkest green lawn in your neighborhood.
Bring in a soil sample from your lawn for a free pH test. Get your soil recommendations from the experts at Jackson's.
Soil is the life of a farm, and for 25 years, SureCrop Liquid Crop Nutrition has helped growers produce abundant quality crops while preserving and improving the soils they steward. SureCrop offers complete soil and plant analysis with cropping recommendations, delivery direct to your on-farm storage, and quality crop nutrition custom blended for your field. Choose SureCrop for the assurance of excellence for your soil. Call today or visit their website for more information. Around Kansas, brought to you by
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff Progress Powered by Kansas farmers.
Well, Locke, thanks so much. And again, I'm sorry that we can't go up on the mountain today and visit, but if people want to come to Patrick County and do that, can you arrange that?
Oh, yeah. I want to extend an invitation. Anybody from Kansas, please come to Patrick County. I think it is as beautiful as anywhere else in the country. We do have some many tourist attractions, and if you would like to visit this crash site, you can contact me through the veterinary hospital here, and we'll arrange for you to make a trip up there.
Wonderful.
And if I got any time at all, I'll go with you. I love going up there. It's a beautiful, isolated place in the mountain, and it is to me, it is almost like a war graves memorial, and it's a very somber, interesting, and beautiful place to be. And I'm sorry these guys didn't have 50 feet more altitude.
Thanks so much.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff Progress Powered by Kansas farmers.
Welcome to Kansas, gateway to Oz. Under the rainbow this is where it was. Hollyhocks and red ripe tomatoes, hand-churned homemade ice cream. Let me tell you, Kansas is more than tornadoes. We're the best part of Dorothy's dream.